So this is task 1 from Standards Algebra, and as a reminder, these notes are available on my Venture webpage in my locker, and I strongly recommend that if you're watching this, you print out a copy of the notes so you have it to take notes on while I go through it. Okay, so this is task 1. First, we're going to, by the way, all of this should be reviewed to you. We're going to look at integers and some vocabulary words and concepts today. This should be review. If it does not feel like review, make sure you're spending extra time in class to get help and support to make sure you have these concepts really solid. Okay, so we're comparing and ordering integers. The definition of integers is that they contain the counting numbers, which are these positive integers, the numbers we use to count with, and I'm sorry my graphics are a little bit off to the left up here. So 1, 2, 3, etc. All of the negatives of those counting numbers, and 0, which I note here is not positive or negative. Okay, so when we order integers, we can think in terms of a number line, or actually draw a number line, which I strongly recommend. And I've made a number line available to you. If you haven't been to class and received one, then you can print it out on my school loop locker. Okay, so take a look at this number line, and you'll see how helpful it is in comparing integers. So we have -7 and -4. And we know that on the number line, our numbers are increasing from left to right. So if we compare -7 to -4, we can see that -4 is larger because it's to the right. So -7 is less than -4. Similarly, and take a second, when I give you a you try, my recommendation if you're watching these videos is to hit pause. Try it yourself and then come back and see if you've done it the way I would. Okay, so I'm going to compare 3 to -8. 3 is to the right of -8, so 3 is greater than -8. Okay, let's look at finding the opposite. Opposite is a vocabulary word that you need to be very comfortable with. What it means is that if a number is an opposite, well, it's just on the other side of 0. So two numbers that are the same distance from 0 but on opposite sides are called opposites. So -7 and 7 are opposites. What's the opposite of -4? Well, it would be +4 because it's on the opposite side of 0. What's the opposite of 8? Well, that would be -8. Okay, now we're going to look at absolute value. And again, this is a challenging concept, but it should be familiar. An absolute value, and here's how it's written, is the distance between that number and 0. Now, you'll see I've put up in the little bubble here, remember that a distance is always positive, and that's important to keep in mind because that's what an absolute value is. It's always a positive. Okay, that's what absolute value, that's what those bars do. They take anything inside and make it positive. So the absolute value of -4 then is +4. The absolute value of 4 is 4. The absolute value of -5 is +5. Okay, I want you to go ahead and pause and try these, and then now that you're back, you can see that the absolute value of -3 is 3. That's what you should have gotten. The absolute value of -8 is 8, and the absolute value of 8 is 8. Note that these are all positive. Okay. Now turn over to the back of the page, and we're going to look at 3 methods for adding integers. Adding integers can still be a struggle even when you get into calculus. A lot of people have to stop and think, okay, when I'm adding a large negative integer to a smaller positive integer, that can be kind of challenging. Sometimes it helps to think in terms of a number line or to have a method that you're very comfortable with. For smaller numbers, we can use methods 1 and 2. For larger numbers, you're going to want to be familiar with method 3, which is the method that they discuss in the textbook. Okay, so using a number line. Okay, using a number line. And again, if you don't have a number line when you're doing your homework, either get the number line that I have available in my school loop locker or draw a number line. Eventually, if you used a number line enough, you start to picture it in your head, and then you don't need it as much. Okay, so examples. Use a number line to find the sum. So the way we use a number line to find a sum, and notice the hint says start at 0, is that you first start in whatever direction, in the direction of your first number. So my first number is a positive 8. So I'm going to go 8 to the right. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then I'm going to go in the direction of my second number, which is negative 2. If there were 3 numbers, I could continue to do the same thing. So I'm going to start at 8 and go 2 to the left. 1, 2. That puts me at 6, which is the answer. So you pause and do the U-try. Okay, the answer for the U-try, you're going to start at 0 and go negative 3, 3 to the left. Then you're going to count 10 to the right. Excuse me while I just erase this. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, that puts us at positive 7. See how that works? It's a very useful method. Another method that a student taught me was, I like to call it Carlos's method because it was Carlos who taught it to me. But we'll call it the plus-minus method since you probably don't know Carlos. And what you do is you line up pluses and minuses. You put the number of pluses that match the positive number and the number of minuses that match the negative number. Then you can cross out the pairs. They cancel. And whatever's left over is your answer. And here we have 6 pluses, so our answer is positive 6. So hit pause and do the U-try. Okay, for the answer to the U-try, we're going to have to put 9 minuses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 3 pluses. I'm going to cancel my pairs. 1, 2, 3 pairs. And how many minuses do I have left over? I have 6, so the answer is negative 6. Now we're going to look at the book method, and I'm going to do a little sample problem off to the right here, and I'd like you to write it down also. If 2 integers have the same sign, we're going to add their absolute values. So you take the absolute value of each integer, and then your result has to have the same sign as the original integers. So let's say we're adding negative 2 plus negative 12. We're going to take the absolute value of each of these, so that's 2 and 12, and we're going to add them together. That's 14. But then the result has to have the same sign as the original numbers, so our answer is negative 14. Okay, let's say they have different signs. Then you're going to subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. And then the sum has to have the same sign as the larger absolute value. This seems like a lot of words and steps to remember. It's not bad when you practice, so it's very important that when you do your homework, you practice using this method. You can use the other method for a few of them, but I really want you to get used to the books method because this is what you need to use for larger numbers. So let's practice one of these. I'm going to give you -3 plus 6. So we're going to subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. Well, my absolute values are 3 and 6. So if I subtract the smaller one from the larger one, that's 6 minus 3, that gives me 3. The sign has to be the same as the larger absolute values, so that's positive. So my answer is a positive 3. Now, here's the part I like. For subtracting integers, we're just going to turn all of our subtraction problems into addition problems, and then we can just apply our three methods, whichever one we like. Okay, so to subtract an integer, that's the same thing as adding the opposite. So you can turn any subtraction problem into an addition problem. So 6 minus 7 is the same thing as, remember, we're adding the opposite, 6 plus the opposite of 7, which is -7. Okay, and look at this one. 3 minus a -5 is the same thing as, remember, we're adding the opposite, 3 plus a +5, since +5 is the opposite of -5. Now, one other little trick you can use if it helps you to remember, some of my students like to say, well, you have two minus signs, you can put those together to make a plus sign. So minus a negative is a plus. And that's it.